Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. I'm hoping you guys are all having a fantastic day. In today's video, as you can tell by the title, we'll be talking about this early season winter storm, the first one of the season that is currently developing across the United States. As you can see, the satellite imagery view above my head has the United States showing and the southern Canada and portions of northern Mexico. And what we see is a massive blossoming of precipitation and cloud heights across the northwestern and central plains of the United States. So this system is already well underway, but the impacts of it aren't finished, and there will be a lot of impacts for a good portion of the United States that are indirectly brought by this system in the form of winds, very, very strong winds into tomorrow, and there will be a pretty high risk of fire as it's very dry and these winds will be strong. So I'll go into talking about that. As always in these videos, at the very top right above my head, there's a timestamp for where this map that I show is currently taking place, and I say that usually I say when the map is taking place, but sometimes I don't, so in case you get lost, you can look at that. So right now, as you can see, it is 7 p.m. October 4th that this is situated at, and I'm going to be showing you the HER model. So this is a high-resolution, short-range model. It only goes out to 18 hours, so I'll show you the next 18 hours, and then I will go to the model run of the same model that goes out to 48 hours every 6 hours, and then I will show you what the storm will do later as it develops across the Midwest and the plains of the United States. So note that right now it is already underway, right? In yesterday's video there was pretty much nothing. The precipitation shield was not really developed at all. Right now we are developing rain across Wyoming, eastern Montana, southern Montana. It's moved out of northeastern Utah at this point, but it's producing snow across the Yellowstone Plateau. And as I put this forward, you can see that this system, it's at 990 millibars. It goes through various periods of weakening, strengthening. It doesn't evolve into a monster, but it is a very characteristic system, a cyclone, at least across the northern hemisphere. All low pressure spin counterclockwise, and you can see that the L marked by the map right there has a pretty strong cold front developing to the south of it. It has a warm front that is really weirdly angled, kind of almost towards the north and east, and it has a backside of the precipitation, which usually is snow if it's cold enough, and in this case it's not cold enough for say Montana, the lowlands of Montana, to see snow. It's falling in the form of rain, but the mountainous areas and Wyoming are going to be seeing snow from this, and that's exactly what's happening. As I put this forward into the overnight hours today, into 10, 11 p.m., you can see that there's a pretty nasty line of storms that could develop across the Dakotas. Now, I wouldn't say that there's a major risk for severe weather, but a few severe thunderstorms are very likely. There are actually some going on right now as I'm recording this video into portions of Nebraska and southern South Dakota. And notice that this system really does develop into a pretty gnarly system. It has quite a bit of rain on the northern side of it, and as I keep moving this forward, you can see that this rain begins to intensify and coalesce into a really large area across the Dakotas into southern Canada. So a good soaking rain. This will be very nice for areas that need rain. May not be the best for farmers that are harvesting crops right now, as that might impede on some of that or lead to a little bit of rotting in the fields. But it definitely is it's a good thing overall. Notice that this system doesn't really have a cold front that develops, and the reason for that is there is an overwhelmingly southern flow from the United States, from the southwesternly United States. So the winds are orienting in this direction, and that's helped because there's a strong high pressure which is driving these winds here. And what this does is that the cold front tries developing here, but it can't, because this system essentially gets into this really strong streak of strong winds, and anything that tries to get developed here kind of gets sheared out. So this system just essentially develops into almost a line, a kind of a positively tilted in terms of slope rain shield, and the cold front doesn't develop till much later on in the weekend, or in the week into Tuesday and Wednesday across the central United States. So I will show you that in a long range model. Do note that as we go into the overnight hours into tomorrow, 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 7 a.m., this system continues to develop. Notice that the millibars aren't really weakening. It is staying or strengthening, so it's staying around the same intensity. And look at that. Look at those rainfall rates across North Dakota and southern Saskatchewan here. Those are some really, really heavy rainfall rates, and that would lead to a lot of precipitation. And this is unfortunately as far out as we can get with this current model run. So I will show you the total accumulated precipitation next, and then I will show you the further outlook. So just through those 18 hours of time, you can see that takes us through 11 a.m. tomorrow, October 5th, Sunday. You can see that the rest of the United States is very dry. There will be quite a bit of heavy rain potentially just off the coast of New Orleans and Louisiana and Florida, so I do want to say that for anyone living across the south. That is definitely going to be a little bit of a concern there and something to keep an eye on for. But yeah, you can see that the main precipitation is across Montana, Wyoming, and especially North Dakota, South Dakota. And yeah, there will be amounts that get into the 2 to 3 inch range. And as we get into Saskatchewan there and eastern Ontario, Western Ontario, these totals aren't finished yet because, again, this only takes us through 11 a.m. tomorrow morning. So now I want to show you the longer version of the herd that comes out every 6 hours. So I had to go back 4 hours ago. So this was released at I believe 4 to 5 o'clock, more like 3 o'clock Central Time today. So the data is still more or less the same. The system, thankfully, is pretty well agreed on by the models. Sometimes this is a little bit risky because I'm showing you older data that might not be as accurate. A few hours old data sometimes is very out of date, and with some winter storms, especially if there's a track change. In this case, that isn't really true. And do note that we are still seeing snow at this point across Montana, into Wyoming, into portions of northern Idaho, around tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. exactly where we left off. Also, to note, as I mentioned earlier, there are going to be very, very strong southwesterly winds across a good portion of the central United States. You can see that those isobars are pretty tightly packed again, not only because of that low pressure, but more importantly because of that really big high pressure across the eastern United States that is forcing this to turn into a strong alley of winds. And again, you can see the cold front does try developing there across potentially Minnesota and into Iowa, but it really falters and doesn't really amount into much. It will develop eventually, just in a really weird fashion, and I'll show you that. Notice that as we go into the day Sunday, a little bit of showers across Minnesota and Wisconsin from that cold front trying to form. At this point, later on in the day, getting closer to almost Monday, we are beginning to develop a cold front from this system. Note that at this point, the precipitation shield is gone from the Dakotas. The low pressure is across central Ontario, so this is very, very far north. This system is completely detached at this point, essentially, from the dynamics that are going on to the south. But it gave enough of that little bit of energy for this cold front to kind of ignite. Notice we are still dealing with precipitation across Wyoming and into portions of Colorado, so the snow will linger there, and that's why some of these snowfall amounts will be very impressive, potentially up to 2 feet of snow again across some of the peaks, maybe even more. So yeah, first winter storm, mountainous winter storm of the year. There were a few little smaller events earlier on in the year, but this one is the first big one. As I put this forward into the nighttime, as we get into Monday now, Sunday, the weekend draws to a close, you can see that the cold front doesn't explode, but it's there. There is a little bit of precipitation, and at this point it's getting help from another low pressure, potentially from the southwest, adding in a little bit of moisture and kind of disrupting some of those southwesterly winds, which allow it to flourish a little better. Notice that while we go into the morning hours of Monday, the cold front is there. It doesn't really intensify, but by the time we're getting towards midday Monday, we start getting some of that daytime heating. Some of those showers and storms start acting up across Iowa and portions of Nebraska. Unfortunately, this is as far out as we can get with the short range model, so I'll switch it over now to the global model and show you what the rest of this cold front does. So by 1 p.m. on Monday, you can see that the radar will probably look something like this. This isn't the MSLP precipitation rate like I show in some maps. This is the actual composite reflectivity, so more or less what the radar, the GFS thinks the radar will look like. And do note that, again, there could be some heavier rainfall rates across Iowa into portions of Wisconsin. Now, this isn't a monster cold front in the terms of its strength. It is a monster in the terms of how large it is. Look, so this system is across northern Quebec at this point. It's skedaddled out of here very quickly. But notice that the thing that is left behind is almost 1,000, probably more, close to 2,000 miles long, stretching almost into the southwestern United States from northern Quebec. An incredible, incredible length for a cold front. We don't often see this, but notice that this thing becomes disorganized. It begins developing precipitation kind of already where the cold front technically cleared. So again, this cold front doesn't really scour out moisture as a typical really strong cold front behind the system. It's a lot more disorganized than that, and so that could lead to several periods of showers and waves of storms. Notice this is 7 p.m. Monday into the overnight hours into Tuesday, this thing really potentially flourishes into much stronger of a cold front across the Ohio Valley as it races towards the St. Lawrence River Valley into the northeast there and New England. And this thing potentially stays there for quite a few periods of 6-hour periods. So this could really be potentially bringing rain to portions of Iowa, Indiana, Pennsylvania, southern Quebec there, possibly for 12 to 18 hours, showers and storms. And each one of these little showers or storms may have quite a bit of rain with them. So it eventually moves into the northeast. Again, pretty good precipitation rates. So the rainfall rates, especially across the eastern United States, and rainfall amounts will be pretty significant. Notice that at the end, a high pressure replaces this all, so that kind of allows a little bit of cooler air to move in. Not really cold for this time of the year, but just cooler compared to what we have been seeing. So as you can see now, I'm showing you the GFS, so the global model precipitation amounts. Note, the heaviest amounts will probably still be across the Dakotas there, which the short-range herd model I was showing you with. But you can see that it does bring a little bit of precipitation into Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, potentially Kentucky, the Appalachian areas, and into the Northeast throughout the week. So this will be bringing a little bit of relief for some of these areas that have recently developed drought, as September has been very, very dry for a good portion of the eastern United States. Here in my area in Chicago, we've only gotten close to 1/4 of an inch of rainfall for the whole month of September, so one of the driest months on record. And note that there could also be a little bit of precipitation across Louisiana into portions of Mississippi and Florida with some tropical activity. Otherwise, that is basically it. That is that first winter storm of the season. So yeah, this isn't anything mind-boggling, or this isn't a monster. I wouldn't even really call it very powerful, but it is a winter storm nonetheless, and it's kind of exciting to see that in a very, very otherwise warm fall, and it does look like that pattern will continue to an extent. Again, I did think that September and October would be very warm months, and that seems to be playing out. I do think November will get cold pretty quickly. Whether or not that happens, that remains to be seen. So far, there aren't really any major indications of that. And just to finish the video off, I want to show you the European total accumulated precipitation amounts. So this is a different model that we used amongst several. And notice that it's pretty similar to the GFS, which is why I didn't really differentiate between the two as much, especially very similar for the first part of that storm across the Dakotas into Wyoming, into Idaho, and across Canada. But the main difference, I would say, with the European and GFS is what happens across the Northeast. If you recall, the GFS showed potentially up to an inch and a half of rain across some areas in the Northeast, while the European does show a little bit of precipitation, but not much. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see how that cold front really develops precisely as we get further along. Again, this continued system has a long way to go by the time it reaches the Northeast, so the models are still trying to figure that one out, and it will be close to Wednesday or Thursday when that cold front hits the Northeast. So by then the details will be ironed out. I recommend obviously checking your local National Weather Service offices to see whether or not that rainfall forecast looks like. And with these cold fronts, sometimes it's really hard to predict what areas will get hit. Some areas might get absolutely clobbered, while other areas might remain completely dry. So the European, as you can see, almost kind of develops several distinct areas. That first wave of the actual system itself, then that kind of attempted cold front across the middle part of the country, and then potentially another surge of moisture across the central Ohio River Valley area into the St. Lawrence area. So again, that is basically it for today's video. Hopefully you enjoyed. I appreciate you watching, and I'll catch you all on the next episode. See ya. Bye.